terror launchpads, neutralizing over 100 terrorists and disabling Pakistan's air capabilities at 13 different air bases. But what did much of the global media report? And why is the foreign media still reading from Pakistan's script? This is why India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval dared the critics and the foreign media to produce a single image of destruction of the Indian property by Pakistan. Now let's put the spotlight on the evidence. While India released satellite images and videos showing damage to terrorist camps and Pakistani air bases, Pakistan's claims of Indian losses came without a single verifiable photograph.
You tell me one photograph, one imagery. These days, these imageries are from the satellites all over the world. They are this thing, which shows any Indian damage being done, even a glass pane having been thrown. I don't know, only our forces will be knowing what's happening in this thing, but I am just telling, they brought out photographs, they wrote this thing, the New York Times put it this thing, put out very this thing. Only imagery, they said 13 air bases of Pakistan now and now, before 10th May and after 10th May. Whether it was in Sargoda, or it was in Rahim Yar Khan, or it was in Chaklala, or it was in Rawalpindi, any of the places that there are 13 important air bases, including the Bellary, where they have got the AVAX, the avoidance control systems. Now, I'm not telling any of this thing. I'm only telling what the foreign media, on the basis of the imageries, have put the images in it. So we're very able to achieve it. We are capable of doing that.
Initially, the foreign media reports leaned heavily on Pakistan's statements, often without independent verification. Only when the satellite images emerged did the narrative begin to shift. So how did a counter-terror operation backed by satellite imagery and high-precision strikes get spun as a reckless escalation? Western outlets frequently used Pakistan-based stringers or official military statements, especially in the fog of breaking news. Cold War alliances positioned Pakistan as a US ally, creating a legacy of narrative preference in Western reporting. The race to break news meant early reports prioritized speed over accuracy. Amplifying Pakistan's unverified claims before India's evidence was globally disseminated. Now, despite India's robust evidence, its outreach to international media lagged, allowing initial misinformation to take root. Now, that brings us to the big question of the day. Why foreign media's inherent bias against India? And can India's messaging gap be reduced for a better outreach? And to discuss this further, I'm joined by an esteemed panel of guests this evening. I'm joined by Ms. Nina Slama, who's from the foreign policy expert, Richmond University, live with us from Israel. I'm also joined by Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni of the Defense and Geopolitical Expert, and Adit Kothari, the Foreign Affairs Expert. Good evening to all of you, and thank you for taking our time and joining us here at News9. I'll first go across to you, Ms. Nina Slama. Now, I'm taking a leaf from what the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval had to say. Now, what explains Western media's, obsession with Pakistan's ill-informed, unverified, bordering obsession with trying to push for an imaginative narrative about this entire Operation Sindoor and Pahalgam is concerned? The question I'm asking to you, Ms. Lama, is that, is there a mandate to adhere to an agenda for the Western media?
So thank you, Ms. Kapoor. It is indeed a challenge that not only India but also Israel, I'm coming from Israel, have to address when it comes to war times and also regular times. When we, as democratic countries that has to defend themselves, fight in an hybrid war against terrorist organizations or state-sponsored terrorist organizations, we have to fight in multiple fronts. And I'm not only talking about geographical fronts. There is, of course, the psychological front, where terrorist organizations try to disseminate fear and anxiety among the people, but also the information front, where we can see different media outlets spreading fake news, misinformation, and disinformation in different platforms. Now, we as democratic countries has to deal and address the challenge by bringing new ideas and innovative ideas when it comes to the information war. We can, for instance, use influencers through social media to not only project or present our stand in a binary way, but to show that there is an historical background to each and every conflict, that the conflict itself is very complex. There are many elements that are part of a certain conflict, and to show a more broader image when it comes to hybrid warfare. We can also use the diaspora, that is very important, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi is putting a lot of emphasis on the diaspora, especially when he is paying official visits to different countries. So there are ways to tackle this challenge of misinformation and disinformation, and it is, of course, a very challenging front.
I mean, this entire episode where the Western media was found wanting, reporting through this entire episode that unfolded as far as the Pahalgam attack followed by the Operation Sindoor is concerned, it is a worrying trend at that. I'll go across to you, Mr. Adit Kothari. Now, India provided satellite imagery. We are living in digital times. So when Pakistan fails to substantiate its claims of destroying India's Rafale jets or trying to, carry out certain strikes over here in India, is not supported by imageries or photographic evidence, why should Pakistan's narrative at all be given credence to by the Western media unless there is an agenda? Mr. Kothari, I'll request you to kindly unmute yourself.
Hi, Sami. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Apologies. I think you answered this question right at the start of things. The Western media is typically very news hungry, and the Indian military and the government's response is very calibrated. So they would only provide information once there was substantiated information available at their disposal. Whereas on the Pakistani side of things, they like to manufacture lies. I mean, the whole purpose of setting up DGISPR in 1949 was to manage the civil and military relationships. And that was only to ensure that the civil population in Pakistan is held hostage by the Pakistani army. And thereby it allows the Pakistani army to be an army which controls the country rather than a country which has an army. Which is what they have been doing, whether it was 65, whether it was 71, whether it was 99. Again and again, the Pakistani army, along with its DGISPR, has been peddling misinformation, which allows its people to have faith in them. And as a consequence, the people do not hold the military and its establishment accountable, and thereby continue to believe in all the fakery and all the lies. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is, what did they actually do? The DGISPR, manufactured over 1,000 social media accounts between May 6th and May 10th. After that, they were the ones who were providing information to New York Times, to Reuters, etc., with the help of the Turkish and the Chinese governments, because the Chinese governments were the ones who were actually manufacturing those fake satellite images for Pakistan, because Pakistan clearly does not have that kind of intelligence to be able to do that. So it was all China. So we know for a fact.
But then with the Western media, are they not going to independently verify? Are they going to buy whatever is being fed by Pakistan? That doesn't really add up. I'll also come back to you, Mr. Kothari, but I'm also joined by Baswati Mukherjee, who's a former Indian diplomat. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time and joining us over here. Ms. Mukherjee, now India seems to have ticked all the boxes. They had targeted attacks. The mission was precision driven, no civilian casualties. But then what really explains the lag in India's approach when it comes to the communication outreach with the Western media? Did India underestimate Pakistan's, rapidly growing disinformation campaign against India? Because why was there a communication gap? Why couldn't India drive home a point to Western media that this is exactly the targets that we have attacked, and what Pakistan is saying should be actually called out for their bluff?
I think, Samia, it's important to understand that the Western media, some outlets like Economist, etc., have a deep-rooted bias against India. So let's not be naive in imagining that they're going to be completely idealistic about it. Let's not also forget that particularly British media, which is where Audit comes from, still regards India as an ex-colony, and they have a very patronizing and colonial approach towards us. And that when Pakistan was established in 47, it was always intended to impede India's rise. Now, coming to your question, were we at fault in not countering Pakistani media? Not at all. We do not manufacture news, nor do we give out fake narratives, nor are we ever going to give out fake narratives. If the Western media wants to go in for fake narratives and for instance, Rafale debris manufactured by the Chinese, or bombings in near Delhi manufactured by the Chinese. They want to believe it. They are welcome to believe it. But over a period of 3 to 4 to 5 days, they understood, and their rhetoric immediately came down. That's why we sent out also the outreach delegation to make people understand that India is a responsible country with responsible armed forces. We set out our target of 23 days with precision strikes and no civilian casualties, as you correctly pointed out. And we achieved what we had to do. We did what we had to do. We did not manufacture narratives. And if the West wants us to start manufacturing narratives, we are not going to do that. On the other hand, I do believe that the next time we should much more aggressively engage with these kinds of media outlets, like we've used Indian media outlets. We should ourselves, through our spokespersons, etc., be much more aggressive in countering this kind of fake narratives and make them understand that over a period of time, it's their credibility which is being destroyed, because when the New York Times or the Economist on a continuous basis tries to sell the narrative that India has lost the war, when the US president claims that he has brought about a ceasefire, when the Pakistani DGMO is begging our DGMO for a ceasefire, and Trump is saying he did it only because he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. Well, if they want to buy that, that's fine by me. But how long will they buy it? Over a period of time, they got completely discredited. So I do believe the lesson for us, Soumya, is that we professional diplomats and spokespersons, we have to be much more aggressive with these people. But on the other hand, we should not fall into the trap of telling them lies or showing them manipulated artificial intelligence.
No, because what happens, Ms. Mukherjee, is that initially, of course, they were trying to tow the Pakistan's life. They were borrowing heavily from all the narrative that Pakistan wanted to feed the Western media. And then, when India provided them with imageries, then, of course, they started saying that these are conflicted report, and then eventually they shifted the narrative. But by then, the damage was done. It started spreading like wildfire as far as the misinformation campaign is concerned. So my question would then go across to you, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. There seems to be a pattern when it comes to the Western media. This is not the first time around. We are seeing what happened over here in Pahalgam and then Operation Sindoor, how India's narrative was being compromised by them. But we saw it happen in 2019 also, when the Balakot strikes had happened, when they tried to amplify Pakistan's narrative, and also in 2008 when the Mumbai terror attack happened, where they tried to marginalize India's evidence. Do you think there is a need for India to talk tough? Of course, the NSA, Ajit Doval, did that this morning. But otherwise, on global platforms, India need to call them out.
Definitely, Samir. Adding to what the distinguished panelists have all said, let me tell you, Pakistan has been with the Western media for a very, very long time. They have been I wouldn't use a word like in buying or something, but they have deep inroads into the senators. They know how to go about it. They manage it. So that's the first thing. Secondly, as regards Operation Sindoor specific is concerned, and even earlier, if you look at Guardian, look at Telegraph, the British newspapers, all along, the creation of Pakistan has been a British creation. And therefore, they have always been with a soft corner towards Pakistan, irrespective of whatever India might do, because somehow they can't somehow digest that India is doing extremely well economically, militarily, politically, and as a nation. It is doing strong and is going stronger. And therefore, this is something which the Western world doesn't seem to digest. The second part is the American media. Now, the American media, be it the New York Times, Washington, has always been anti-India. Let's put it that way. But in this specific case, probably what may have happened, besides what the panelists have said, Mr. Trump, the president, felt probably slighted that how that India doesn't seem to give him a credit for the ceasefire, and the Pakistani media seems to going gaga. The chief of the army staff of Pakistan is there in America. You find everywhere across Pakistan saying, wow, this is what it is. We now nominate him for Nobel Prize. So therefore, just somewhere down the line, they seem to feel that the President of the United States, who seems to be going out the work, trying to tell the world that it is dead, and he specifically was instrumental for the ceasefire, when India seems to feel, well, it is not him at all. It's because the Pakistanis came on their knees, that their BGMO called up, and that he took a call on what needs to be done.
Yes.
Because since what entire Operation Sindoor was about hitting terrorist locations, and since the terrorists have been decimated, that 9 terrorist locations have been hit extremely hard. We had Masood Azhar, the UN designated terrorist, crying that which he had died because he had lost all his family members, and that's the reason why the whole thing was. Our aim was not fighting Pakistan. Our specific aim for Operation Sindoor was to decimate the terrorist locations.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, it was a precision-driven mission, and with no civilian casualties, successfully eliminating more than 100 terrorists, both from Lashkar-e-Toiba and from Jaish, while Pakistan can continue living in denial. I'll come back to you, Ms. Nina Slama. Now, you know, Pakistan has time and again being called out for cross-border terrorism, while the Western media continues to shield Islamabad. But when the defense minister of the country goes on to say that they have been doing the dirty work at the behest of the West, how can the Western media overlook this statement? How could they not see through how Pakistan has been a safe haven for them to breed terrorism right under their nose?
Yeah, so Western media would like also to appease their own population when it comes to Arab and Muslim countries, not only in South Asia, but also in West Asia. And in order to do so, they are taking a balanced approach or siding with the wrong side that is attacking democratic countries. And this is why we as democratic countries, India and Israel, should always try to project and present our approach in regular times and also in war times, because a narrative is shaped through time. And in order to show this population that is quite ignorant, you know, in the West and in other places in the world when it comes to protracted conflicts, this is something that has to be done gradually. And this is why it is important not only
but done gradually, Ms. Slama, but I would like to quote over here, and I'll come to you, Ms. Mukherjee, once again. Where as far as the New York Times is concerned, or for that matter, the Washington Post, who did not even term them as terrorists, who killed 26 tourists on 22nd April this year. They termed them as gunmen. Now, are you not trying to undermine and play with the seriousness of the issue over here? It looks like they have chosen their words very carefully to try and omit the word terrorism over here, to side with Pakistan and give them that long rope. Ms. Mukherjee.
Well, since you addressed the question to me, let me answer it very frankly to you. It never surprises me that the West has double standards, whether it's towards Israel or it's towards India. As far as India is concerned, you very correctly pointed out, and Lieutenant General Kulkarni pointed out, that the West cannot stomach India's rise. It bothers them. How has this country risen the way it has, with a great economy, overtaking its former colonizers, now well on its way to becoming the world's second largest economy in 20 years' time. So the point here is these double standards will prevail, and we as Indians have to develop a thick skin to deal with such double standards. We have to be with them, we have to tell them with contempt or with aggression or with anger that we don't take this kind of language from you anymore. You don't want to understand India's rise. You don't want to accept that these terrorists came, they picked out Indian men for their religion, they verified their religion and shot them in cold blood in front of their mothers, in front of their wives, in front of their daughters. And you still don't want to call them terrorists, but you expect us to condemn when such terrorist incidents happen in your part of the world. That's part of double standards. We have to get used to it. And if we feel surprised or we feel hurt, it means we have not grown up. We are now a mature nation. We have to take this in our stride. We have to understand that until our GDP is that of a almost developed country, they are going to treat us like this. They are going to treat us that we are brown, we are poor, we are semi-literate. No matter what we do, they'll say that look at their poverty, look at their slums. They will always look at India's flaws. They will never accept India's strength. And that, Samia, is a hard truth that I understood when I joined Foreign Service in 1976. It was much more difficult at that time. That truth, all of us Indians who are in this kind of job, whether yours or mine, we have to swallow, we have to accept, and we have to give it right back whenever they try to humiliate us. Because they will continue to try to humiliate us until we become a major economic power. That is why in China, for instance, one of their leaders has said, keep quiet until you grow economically. Once you grow economically, they'll all run to you. That was a very correct statement that he made. You will watch, Samia, because you're much younger than me. Give India another 5 years and then see how their fake narrative changes. Our narrative will always be truthful because we are the country of truth. Their narrative will change and come right back to us because by that time we will be too big and too powerful to be put in the corner as we have for so long. We are the elephant. We will not sit in the corner. We will be in the center of the room. We have already moved to the center of the room and we will continue to occupy the center of the room. Sunny.
Absolutely. And Maria, saying it from a point of experience, like you mentioned, like how you have faced it, like how you witnessed how India's position was compromised by Western media, and perhaps it's not going to happen in future. But Mr. Kothari, we are going to be calling out these publications, whether it's Reuters or it's BBC or it's Al Jazeera, Washington Post, all of them seems to be following a set pattern. But do you feel there is a need for India also to try and diplomatically do an outreach way by which this sort of a communication or messaging gap can be reduced? Of course, India did send a delegation of MPs later to several countries, several nations to put their standpoint across. But do you feel that was a little too late in the day?
I don't feel it's a little too late in the day. I think the time has come that, India must spread its tentacles wherever the world of academia and journalism is. And that is where we clearly, lack that kind of intent. You'll be surprised, Samia, to know that most of the people who are actually writing for the BBC or the Al Jazeera's are your Shomin Mitras and the Srinivasan Jains of the world. So they are basically Indians who are writing anti-India propaganda. So most of the fault lines lie within us. So that needs to be addressed first. And I think it also becomes very important to assess that why was this kind of false narrative actually engineered? We have to realize that this was more like an anti-Rafale kind of a propaganda machinery that was run by the Western media in cahoots with the Chinese because they were interested to promote the Chinese military complex. And that becomes very important from a Chinese military perspective to ensure that, there is anti-Rafale information there in the domain so that, prospective buyers like Indonesia who were contemplating on bidding for the Rafales, would be deterred and would be sort of prodding upon thinking about the Chinese J10s or the JF-16s of the world. So that was one aspect of it. The Western media is always going to harbor that sort of anti-India sort of narrative. The question is, how do we address that? We need to get into the world of academia. We need to get into the world of journalism, and we need to start challenging them from a factual perspective. So we need to start dismantling their false narratives and their fakery. Sami.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have paucity of time, but last 60 seconds, Mr. Kulkarni. When narratives like these are spun around by the Western media in favor of Pakistan, those who are holding fort at the border and carrying out the Operation Sindoor, it impacts their morale. Should the Western media and the Western world not be cognizant of it?
Samia, let me tell you, it doesn't affect at all. We know where we stand. We know what we are doing. We don't need to sell ourselves. Everybody understands what India is. There's a tremendous amount of CK. You see the ambassador, what she saw in 76 and what she sees today. And whenever she's been, everybody respects her. Everybody, every diplomat is respected now. The Indian passport is held with pride. So there's a lot that India has to do. Indians don't have to prove. The Americans want Pakistan for a simple reason,
Right.
what they did in Iran subsequently. It's for a reason that they want to have a foothold in China, so they're using Pakistan. Pakistan is being used. So Pakistan, which at one time always had Allah, America, and the army, has gone back to that. Besides also being a stooge of China.
Absolutely.
So we just ignore the country. We are a great country. We are an old civilization. We don't get affected at all. We know where we start and we prove it. And we will
Right.
continue to prove.
Mr.
we are far
Kulkarni,
better.
and on that note, I will have to interject over there. I will have to wrap this conversation. But clearly, like you've mentioned, these narratives that Pakistan tries to use through their disinformation campaign is not going to impact the morale of the Indian army. India's Operation Sindoor was a resounding military success. Indian forces destroyed terror launch pads, neutralizing over 100 terrorists and disabling Pakistan's air capabilities at 13 different air bases. But what did much of the global media report? And why is the foreign media still reading from Pakistan's script? This is why India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval dared the critics and the foreign media to produce a single image of destruction of the Indian property by Pakistan. Now let's put the spotlight on the evidence. While India released the satellite images and videos showing damage to terrorist camps and Pakistani air bases, Pakistan's claims of Indian losses came without a single verifiable photograph.
You tell me one photograph, one imagery. These days, these imageries are from the satellites all over the world. They are this thing, which shows any